Now it's time for No Pucks Given with Dan Kingerski of Pittsburgh Hockey Now. Penguin scoops, locker room buzz, and straight-up analysis. No fluff, all hockey. Now, here's Dan.
From New York City, it is No Pucks Given, episode 55, the Playoffs Await edition. I am Dan Kingerski on the Pittsburgh Hockey Now platforms. Just behind me is a piece of Grand Central Station. Honest to goodness, because the Penguins play the Islanders Monday night. And many of you will get this downloaded Monday morning. So the big game awaits. We'll probably have to do a follow-up podcast, maybe from the car on Tuesday, pending the outcome on Monday, because the Eastern Conference playoff race has just become an absolute traffic jam. Kind of fitting for New York, don't you think? Between the Islanders being right there, a game, if we put it in baseball terms, the Islanders are a game out. The Columbus Blue Jackets are a half game ahead. The Detroit Red Wings are maybe a game and a half back. The Ottawa Senators are a game back. So all of these things are sort of beginning to just get to be a jumbled mess. And it won't get any better Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, as more of these teams begin to play each other. I don't want to get too much into the details of the standings because, as some of you maybe listened to this on Tuesday, well, everything could be different. Instead, this episode of No Pucks Given, and I'll be having Vince Comunale join me here in a few minutes. What we're going to focus primarily on is the team itself. I think you're seeing really a couple of emergences, but you're also seeing some disappearing as well. So that's where things, I think, are taking a left turn for the Penguins. Let's start with the emergence. And I'm not exactly breaking new ground here when I tell you Erik Karlsson is playing not just at an MVP level, but a Norris Trophy level. And he's doing so. He is having the best stretch by a Penguins defenseman in 36 years. Some of you might not be old enough to remember Paul Coffey. Mario Lemieux went down with back surgery in 89-90. He actually came back for the final game. He couldn't even tie his own skates. He's kind of out there for the power play and just, wasn't Mario, but he was still on the ice for the final game that season. Nevertheless, Paul Coffey, Hall of Fame defenseman. If you never saw Coffey play, you've never seen an NHLer skate. Just unbelievable, especially back then when guys didn't have the wheels they do now. Coffey could play today. He was that fast, and he would still be a burner today. To the short of it, with Coach Craig Patrick, who took over behind the bench, Coffey went off in the month of February. Every game, 2 and 3 points. Put up 28 points in February of 1990. Now, of course, some of you might remember how that season ended. In the final game of the season, big lumbering German defenseman Uwe Krupp, still breaks my heart, scored a goal from about Monroeville on goalie Tom Brazeau. Game winner. Penguins lose. Don't make the playoffs. And back then, because the Penguins had only made the playoffs once in my entire lifetime the previous year, that was devastating to, 10, 11 years old? Which is odd. I'm actually recording this on said guy's birthday. And it broke everybody's... We just cared more back then in a whole different way. In a much more pure or innocent or passionate sort of way. We didn't have 10 billion distractions. We didn't sit there at the game scrolling on our phone. You're at the game, you're at the game. But I digress. And Erik Karlsson is having that kind of month. What he is doing to opponents is quite extraordinary. And to break down his game would be to leave out several facets. The Penguins' blue line is a little bit stabilized now. Chris Letang and Sam Girard in 2 of the last 3 games I thought have been good, or at least good enough, which really takes some pressure off of Karlsson. But what he's doing in the defensive zone. Mike Sullivan used to refer to how Karlsson defended as he defends with his brain, Sullivan would say, and you're seeing that as I welcome in Vince Comunale. Vince, get a little closer to the screen there. Then again, maybe get a little further away from the screen. Keep going back.
Yeah, it depends on your perspective.
But as I was saying about Karlsson, he is engaged defensively. You see him on guys' hips. You see him playing tight gaps. You see his stick in lanes. You even see him around the net grabbing loose pucks. And I don't care if he's 35 years old. He sees a loose puck. It's his, and he's gone. Through the neutral zone, he's finding open men and creating speed and joining the rush. But also the magic at the blue line. How he's walking the blue line and even stepping forward, pulling a defender one way, creating an acre of space at the top of the slot, setting up a teammate, and then cycling back for Karlsson is doing it all, and he is letting loose a wrist shot that it's not quite Igor Chinnikov, but it's pretty close. Vince, you just joined us here. I think you're old enough to remember Paul Coffey's unbelievable February 35, 36 years ago.
Yeah, barely, but I do remember it.
Oh, don't give me that. Erik Karlsson really, I think he is carrying this team. Agree, disagree?
I think when Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin went out, he took it upon himself to take the team on his back. Amongst others, Rickard Rakell's really stepped up his game, and Brian Rust as well. But this is the guy that the Penguins thought they were getting. And he's playing at a Norris Trophy-level.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you what the folks up in Ottawa were saying. The media in Ottawa were saying he's playing better now than he did in that amazing 2013 season. That is widely thought to be his best. They're like, no. He's playing better than that even. So what we might be seeing, quite frankly, is the very best of Erik Karlsson. And I know I've written about this. The way he's sort of commanding the locker room. Commanding is the wrong word. The way he's sort of driving it with the humor and the gregarious jokes and the loud laughs. He really, I very much understand why Kyle Dubas made a point. I wish he'd done it with one of us, local guys. He bypassed us and went to Pierre LeBrun of TSN. Okay, I get it. You go to the big dog and said, listen, take Erik Karlsson's name out of the trade rumors. We intend to keep him. We want to have the young guys around him. We want to build around him. So I get it. I don't necessarily think it's entirely feasible, but it's a nice thought.
Yeah, I mean, it's just amazing what he's doing, and it's everything about his game. He didn't have the confidence, you could tell, last year to do dance with the puck at the blue line. His shot selection is so much better now. How many times did he shoot the puck into the defenseman's shin pads in the past 2 seasons? He's not doing that anymore, and it's just amazing to watch.
Yeah, it's actually kind of fun to watch. So enough pumping the Penguins' tires. Vince, as they go careening towards the playoffs, 9 games to go. Realistically, 6 wins probably gets them in. 12 more points. Think about that. That's 100 points they're going to need probably to get into the playoffs. I'm big enough to admit that when I was, 3 weeks ago, I'm saying, hey, 95 points gets you there. That's these teams have absolutely eviscerated that pace. Even with Columbus losing to San Jose, if they lose, then the Islanders win and Detroit wins or Boston, it's dogs
every
and
night
cats living together, mass hysteria.
It's every night, and then there's so many 3-point games, and I'm with you. I thought 94 or 95 points would get you at least a wild card or third place in the division. You're going to need 99 to 100 at this point.
Yeah.
I mean,
so
it's crazy.
Yeah. So we've got Erik Karlsson. I wonder just how much Sidney Crosby is going to have to give. Clearly, he was not 100% before suffering another lower body injury against Ottawa. And I don't want to say he was playing poorly, but he was not yet his very rough and tumble and dominant self. He was playing as well as he could. But there was clearly a gear missing there. So you've got that. You've got Evgeny Malkin, who is, at this point, bubblegum, duct tape, and some chicken wire holding him together at the end of the season. Anthony Mantha is banged up, taking maintenance days. We now know Brian Rust is banged up, needed a maintenance day at practice Sunday.
Blake
Lizotte is out. Have I missed anybody?
I mean, the rotating injuries on the blue line as well. It seems like the core six are healthy now, but there's been, Letang had the broken foot earlier this year, and Clifton missed some time, and Shea missed the game last week with the upper body injury. But we all know
his face is,
yeah.
I am not an animal.
Yeah. I know this has been talked about by a lot of people, but the loss of Blake Lizotte has really been felt, on the penalty kill, on the fourth line. Now, Soderblom's jumped in and done an admirable job on the fourth line. He had a great game on Saturday. But
thank you for saying so. I felt like I was out on a limb there because nobody else was saying it.
No, I think he had a really good game. I know you and I talked. He had the least amount of ice time of anybody, only like 8 minutes and 25 seconds. But that was largely in part to that he doesn't do penalty kill or power play more than anything. But he had a really strong game. He scored a goal, or he didn't score a goal. He shot the puck off of Noah Jarry and went in. But it's just been tough. You could tell without having Blake Lizotte out there in that fourth line. He's just such an integral part of the penalty kill and that fourth line. And, hopefully the Penguins will be getting him back soon.
Vince, have you felt, and I guess I'll preface the question by saying I feel this way, but I'm going to ask you if you have felt over the last 5 to 10 games, their structure has really been wobbly. They're kind of playing street fighter hockey. Yes. I don't want to call it pond hockey. I would never kind of insult them with that, and because they're not. But there's a little bit of chaos. There's a bit of a mess in their game with all these injuries and the comings and goings, but also the high pressure on some of these guys who have never been in this position before, or at least in this station. At this, spot in the lineup, it just seems a lot of breakdowns.
I think you just get to a certain point where you have so many players missing from your lineup that you just can't keep the structure as it was. And I think that's what we're seeing. I think that they need to tighten up their defense, though. I mean, they're giving up at least 4 goals in just about every game. I think it's 13 out of the last 15, they've given up at least 4 goals. And that's obviously not what you're looking for as you're heading into the playoffs. The goaltending has not been as good, but it's not all on them. And I just think that, like I said, when you take that many players out of the lineup, you're going to lose your structure a little bit.
Fair enough. I do want to add, though, that this is where I think Muse has to grab a hold of his team like he did a week ago. it doesn't matter if Ville, Koivunen, and Rutger McGroarty are your third line, or it's Mantha and Brazeau or whomever there. The structure is the one thing that really can't break down and change. Let's take a quick break here. It is No Pucks Given, episode 55, the playoffs await edition. That's Vince Comunale. I'm Dan Kingerski in New York City. We'll take this time out on the Odyssey Podcast Network. And through the magic of video and technology, we are back. The No Pucks Given, episode 55 podcast. That guy is Vince Comunale. I'm Dan Kingerski. Vince, so you mentioned goaltending right before we went to the break. And it's kind of bedeviled me to analyze because the eye test, you see Stuart Skinner, I think Skinner especially, over the last week and 2 weeks, has made these spectacular saves, has kept his team in the game. But, and here's that very large BUT, there have been some softies as well. I know Erik Karlsson went off on the referee during the play Saturday, but that goal still from the top of the zone can't go in like it.
That has to be stopped. That's the only way to stop Erik Karlsson right now is to rip the stick out of his hands, apparently. You know, the goaltending, like I said, it hasn't been as good. And you're right. You look at some of these games and you're like, look at these amazing saves that Stuart Skinner is making. And, you know, you go back to that game in Carolina where he gave up 6 goals. I thought he played pretty well in that game, but at the end of the day,
so did he, by the way.
Goals. Yeah, I remember that in post game. But at the end of the day, it is 6 goals. That's a lot of goals to give up in an NHL game. You know, I think that he's been having a lot of problems with the longer shots for some reason. I don't know if he's just not seeing the puck through traffic, but it seems like when the more spectacular saves that he's making are all in tight, and then he's getting beat, you know, glove side on a slap shot that he probably should have stopped, like the wrist shot that you mentioned yesterday. So, you know, he's making huge saves, but then 5 minutes later, an ordinary shot goes in, and that's I'm sure that's a little bit frustrating for his teammates.
Yeah, it was a little bit of bad luck against Dallas as well. And what I mean, I guess for those listening to the audio version of this, I apologize. I'm going to kind of do a little reenactment of the third goal, which was Jason Robertson's turning wrist shot from like 35, 40 feet. Matt Duchene kind of got himself centered just above the crease. So Skinner is looking left around Duchene, leans over, looks right. Just as he leans over to look right, the puck goes sailing to his left. Like Robertson couldn't get any better timing or any luckier, or maybe he saw it. Maybe shooters are just that good. He sees Skinner starting to lean and goes to the right. I don't know, but it was just incredibly unlucky for Skinner. Do you think that? And I don't know the answer to this. Do you think Dan Muse will or should now give the bulk of starts to Skinner? Or do we go back to this goalie rotation?
I think at some point you have to choose a goalie. I don't think it's done. It's been done before, but I don't think you could go into the playoffs on a goalie rotation. You have to pick a guy and stick with him. And I think just based on the fact that Stu Skinner has been in the Stanley Cup final the last 2 seasons, I think you stick with him unless he absolutely just falls apart in these last 9 games or 8 games, whatever. I think that you go with him just because of the experience, but you have a short haul. If they get into the playoffs and in game 1 he gives up 5 goals, then the She-loves the next game. Then
that's interesting because to be somewhat sharp, She-loves has to play. He's not a guy that can be on the shelf for 2 weeks and then come in and look like a world beater. That's not him. He has that starting goalie mentality and mindset where he needs to play a lot. By the same token, He also, She-loves and Skinner both had some issues with those long shots lately.
Yeah.
I have to almost wonder, because even going back before, Tristan Jarry was really struggling with the long range shots. How much of that does get
struggling
put
with
on the
every
Penguins
shot.
defenseman?
It's part of it. I mean, you gotta be able to clear those guys out in front so that either one of them could see the puck. Just to back up for a second, we're going to see She-loves play because out of the 9 games left, they have 3 sets of back-to-backs. So he's going to get in there. They have Monday, Tuesday this coming week. Next weekend, they have 2 at home against the Panthers. And then to finish out the season, they have the weekend home and home with the Capitals before they go out to St. Louis for the last game of the season. But so we'll see a lot of She-loves, even if Skinner is the anointed number 1, so to speak. But to your point, yes, they need to do a better job of clearing out the front of the net, and they don't. I mean, the pairing of Shea and Clifton, they do a good job of it because Clifton is like a bulldozer out there, and he's able to move those guys, but. The pairing of Letang and Girard, I worry about them getting taken or out physical, I should say, in a playoff series. The first pair with Karlsson and Wotherspoon. I mean, Wotherspoon does okay with clearing the net, but when Karlsson's out there, the Penguins have the puck usually, so it's not as big of a problem.
No, that's a great point.
Yeah. It's not as big of a problem as when Girard and Letang are out there.
I was just realizing, if Amanda Kessel facilitated a trade of Artur She-loves to Florida, that would mean that she sells She-loves-by-the-seashore. I had to get that out before. Like, it was just going to rattle around my brain all night if I didn't get it out. Anyway.
Okay. Well, that could be the headline if that comes to fruition.
So, Vince, I'm going to ask you the $1 million question. 9 games to go. When people hear this, there might even be only 8 games to go after Monday. I think Monday is going to be huge, but certainly not the deciding game that I think some people are going to make it out to be. I mean, it's going to be a 4-point game with 9 games to go. That's big enough. But if, let's just say, the Penguins lose, I don't know, 4-1, or even 4-3, or 5-4, whatever it might be, there's going to be a response and a reaction on Tuesday.
Yes.
It's not like the season ends if they lose. Conversely, if they win, they have a 3-point cushion on New York, and it's still, 8 games to go, a game and a half. It's not much.
It's literally going to come down to the last day of the season. You wouldn't think when you look at the schedule, the last game of the season is 9:30 on a Wednesday in St. Louis. That game's probably not going to mean much. It's probably going to mean everything. And it's weird to finish the season in a Western Conference city, but whatever.
Yeah, how dumb is that?
Yeah. I mean,
come on. You've got this teed up, NHL. A pair of games, a home and home, Penguins, Capitals.
Yeah.
Put the bow on it. Come on now. You crammed like 18 games into 31 days in the month of March. You couldn't put one back in November?
Yeah.
We placed a Western Conference meaningless team, back then? Come on. It's
and what could be Alex Ovechkin's last game, what a sight that could have been. Sidney Crosby shaking hands with Alex Ovechkin as he rides off into the sunset. Instead, the Penguins are going to St. Louis right after the game.
I know. It's going to be really weird. But getting to the question I didn't ask, and I'm going to get there right now. Do the Penguins make the playoffs?
I think they do, but I'm not sure if it's going to be as the 3rd place team in the division or the second wild card. I think it's just Columbus is never going to lose again. I don't think, even though they did lose to San Jose the other day. They're just on a roll that I have not seen in a long time. They're not going away. They're going to make it. I think Sorokin is going to get the Islanders into the playoffs. He's possibly the Vezina winner. He's just been so good this season. So that leaves the Penguins, and then the Red Wings are still hanging around in the wild card, and the Bruins are still hanging around. And now all of a sudden the Flyers have won like 11 out of 14 or something. They're back.
They're within 4 points.
And the Senators are right there too. I mean, maybe I'm just not recalling correctly, but I've never seen such a tight playoff race in the Eastern Conference before that I can remember.
Well, I think we say that every year, but I don't think we've seen so many hot teams at the end of the year. The last 3 years, 4 years maybe, has been just this war of attrition of who could outlast the other teams. Yeah. This time, it's a genuine sprint. I think one time you had to make one other time you had to get 100 points to make the playoffs, and this is shaping up to be number 2. Vince, I have to tell you, I don't know if the Penguins make the playoffs. And maybe that's reflected in my coverage. They win a shootout in Ottawa. And I'm like, wow, without Sidney Crosby for most of the game, no Evgeny Malkin. I understand Ottawa was missing 3 very important defensemen.
Yes.
But the way the Penguins attacked and sort of held their structure and the way they kept battling and even won in a shootout, I was impressed.
Yeah.
Then they come the next night against Dallas, and they play a great first period. I'm like, okay, this is a playoff team. And then they just absolutely drop kick themselves in the cookie jar.
Yeah, so many penalties.
Squander everything. So here we are talking about the if rather than the when. If they beat Dallas, we're talking about when they make the playoffs.
Yes.
Not if.
Yeah, the game in Ottawa was one of their best of the season. And to your point, they did not lose their structure in that game. They kept it simple. They just played a simple, structured game because they were missing Sidney Crosby for most of the game, missing Evgeny Malkin, missing Blake Lizotte and others. And it worked. Now, again, to your point, Ottawa was missing some key players too, but hey, you can only play the players that are out on the ice. And they won that game in a shootout. Which was shocking. I thought for sure once they went to the shootout, well, here we go again. But
yeah,
and then they come home and they play Dallas, and it kind of all falls apart after the first period. Now, the second period was all over the place with penalties by both teams, and that kind of just got the whole structure of the game all messed up, and I think they never kind of recovered from that disjointed second period.
Yeah, and yet they were a wild scramble with about 8 minutes to go from tying the game. Power play, too many men, so it wasn't like it was a referee judgment call. And there are 3 players from each side in the crease. When that happened earlier in the game, the puck squirts right to, I forget who scored the goal for Dallas.
Yeah, it was, I want to say Blackwood skate.
Yes,
I think it was
Colin Blackwell.
He skated to the net and attempted a backhand shot. It hit a maze of skates in front of the net, never got on goal, and it landed right on his teammate's stick, who, again, I can't remember who scored that either. And it was a wide open net because Skinner had committed to Blackwell's shot.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And yet, when the hockey gods were just tapping the Penguins on the shoulder on Saturday, because the same thing happens and the puck just squirts to the wrong player. Dallas clears. I don't even know how the puck didn't go in, because Ottinger had no idea where it was. The Penguins had it on their stick a couple of times and didn't get it. I want to get to one final issue here. And I hate when I kind of say something. People say, okay, and 2 separate radio shows on the same day had me on, The Fan and a station up in Edmonton. And they're like, okay. And oddly, they both ask the same question. If the Penguins make the playoffs, how will they do it? And I, kind of explain, blah, 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 blah. And then they ask the follow-up question, if they don't make the playoffs, why not? And my answer to both was, well, if they don't make the playoffs, it would be, I think, conceivably because several players aren't prepared for what's to come. Guys who haven't been in this situation before, haven't been counted on to produce at the high level they've been producing down the stretch. I was referring to Tommy Novak, Justin Brazeau, Parker Wotherspoon, Ryan Shea, and even, to a lesser extent, Ben Kindle. Now, I think the defensemen, Wotherspoon and Shea, have upheld their end of the bargain. I think Kindle is holding up his end of the bargain. But when your second line center goes AWOL, like Tommy Novak has, you're in a pickle. You're in a spot.
Yeah, if I was asked that question, I would say, well, it depends on if Sidney Crosby gets back healthy, if Evgeny Malkin gets back healthy. Because I know you and I talked about this a little bit yesterday. I feel like when Tommy Novak isn't playing with Evgeny Malkin, he's just out there on an island by himself. But when Malkin gets back into the lineup, for some reason, those guys have great chemistry. But without him, he's just kind of a guy out there taking up space. And I don't mean that in a mean way. It's just it looks like a different player when Malkin's in the lineup and when he isn't. And the other guys you mentioned, Brazeau, he's not generating the points that he was earlier in the season, and neither is Mantha. Now they both have outperformed what I thought that they would do, but they were at such a level, and they've kind of tailed off a little bit as well. So
I think Mantha has at least upheld enough of I would probably disagree that he hasn't been impactful enough.
Yeah.
No, he had that
yesterday.
Amazing hot streak coming out of the Olympic break. I mean, that was unbelievable.
But I would just say, I hope for experience sake that they do get into the playoffs, even if they lose in the first round. The experience of playoff hockey would be so good for guys like Kindle, Igor Chinikov, players that have never really experienced the playoffs before. I think that would just be a really good experience for them moving forward in the next season.
Well, you've come this far.
Yeah.
The worst case scenario would be to come this far and miss the playoffs. So now you're drafting 15th,
right?
14th, 15th. You don't get the playoff experience. The new owners, old owners, I don't know who would be the owners, in a month, don't get the millions in playoff revenue.
Right.
The fans don't get that, Evgeny Malkin doesn't get that, Sidney Crosby, and it would just be the absolute worst case scenario at this point. But it is a very real possibility. I do wonder if Dan Muse has to tinker with the lineup a little bit. Ville Koivunen, I didn't mention him only because he hasn't put the train on the tracks yet this season. If he and Justin Brazeau need to watch a game, you really can't take out Novak just because of the roster construction. But I do think at least some stern talks are in order. That if you're not going to be putting the puck in the net and creating offensive chances, you have to be doing other things. You have to be, creating, pressuring at least, especially those guys. And I can't say that they're making an impact anywhere.
No, I mean, I'm sure a guy like Kevin Hayes is chomping at the bit to get in there. I'm not saying that he's going to go out there and score a hat trick or anything like that. But if they are going to make the playoffs, you got to get some of these guys that have been sitting some ice time, because if they need to jump into a playoff game and they haven't played in 2 months, that's not going to bode well for anybody. But I do think that maybe it is time to tinker with the lines a little bit, but it's so hard because every game it's a different group of guys that are in there.
Different group that are healthy.
Right. I mean, to your point, I think Koivunen has one shot in the last 3 games that he's played. That's not good enough.
That is correct. Yeah.
And I thought McGroarty looked good yesterday, but he didn't have any shots on goal in the game. He had 2 hits, and that was it.
He had 3 shots blocked, and Dallas did block 25. I was trying to incorporate that into my analysis in the report card, but Novak had a shot blocked, Brazeau had a shot blocked, and none on net. And you're like, okay, this is the middle six without really a top line. So the Penguins really have kind of a middle nine right now without Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin. So they really do need some contributions. They need more people to step forward. I know they're scoring a lot of goals. They have to, but there's, you can't have this roulette wheel every night. You really do need people to begin to carry more than their share, like a Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin would.
Yeah, that was one of the shames about the game against Dallas is they got a fourth line goal. And they really need that secondary scoring right now, obviously. And it kind of went to waste because of all the power play opportunities for Dallas. And to what you said earlier, it's really hard to tell where the second line ends and the fourth line starts right now, because it's just like,
it's a nice way to put it.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like there's a first line and then there's 9 other guys. And when you don't have Evgeny Malkin and Sidney Crosby in your lineup, even at their ages, the whole team takes on such a different look.
Yep. Well, Vince, let's put the bow on it there. Huge game Monday night. That's why I'm in New York City. I guess as the sun set, now you can see the back of my hotel room, no longer the New York skyline.
Yeah.
I'm near Grand Central Station only because I refused to stay in Jamaica, New York. Actually, I love the food in Jamaica. I just don't like walking from the Jamaica transit station to the hotel half mile away at 12:30 at night.
Probably a smart move.
I can take care of myself, but, there are certain circumstances by which I would not be able to. Let's put it that way. And I'd like to avoid any potential mishaps.
I think that's probably a smart move on your part.
Yeah. I mean, Jamaica is really interesting. Like during the day, you've got, all these amazing restaurants like Ethiopian and African restaurants that serve food I've never heard of, and Mexican and Chinese. And it's, really is kind of, I am a greasy spoon connoisseur, and you've got greasy spoons from all over the world in Jamaica, which is kind of cool. But yeah, as the cops looked at me one night as I walked past, they just stopped and stared at me, and they're like, "What are you doing?
You're not from around here, are you?"
Yeah, it's there's a little bit of an Alice in Wonderland as I'm in a suit or dressed for a hockey game, briefcase, walking through the heart of New York City there. So, all right, kids, that is the end of No Pucks Given. Like, share, subscribe, download, yell at me. Yell at Vince, though. Don't yell at me. Yell at Comunale there. And you can find him. For those of you on the video side, right there is Vince's X handle, @PGHVC. All right, kids, have fun.